Hey, what's going on everyone? Greg here, and the iPad mini. It's kind of a strange product. And what I mean by that is, when this thing was announced at Apple's September event, people actually got excited for the idea of a redesigned iPad mini. For a lot of the people watching that event, at least on the internet, the iPad mini was the star of the show. Like, people were more excited about the iPad mini than they were about a new iPhone. And that in itself is strange because when we look at previous iterations of the iPad mini, this was a product that kind of felt like it was on life support. Like, Apple was giving it chip upgrades, and the last iPad mini got like an A12 in it and first gen Apple Pencil support, but it still kept the same form factor from all the way back from 2012. 8 years ago, the iPad mini design has been unchanged. So when Apple actually decided to upgrade this thing and give it a more modern design like the recent iPad Airs or iPad Pros, that was kind of a strange move to me because I honestly thought that they were going to get rid of the iPad mini entirely because as we look at Apple's iPad updates over the years, they have been moving to devices that are trying to replace your laptop or maybe replace some of the jobs your laptop used to do. And that's not necessarily the case with this device. But let's back up a little bit because we should probably talk about this before we talk about that deeper stuff. So as soon as you unbox the mini, you are greeted with what I think is a really nice form factor. So you get now an 8.3-inch display compared to the last iPad mini, which had a 7.9-inch display. Now, the great thing about this design is, even though it does have a slightly bigger display, Apple did not increase the physical dimensions of the iPad mini. In fact, it's actually a little bit smaller this time. So this is the smallest iPad mini yet. And that means that, hey, it's still a great small tablet form factor. You can easily hold it in one hand, kind of palm it like this, scroll with your other hands. It's very lightweight, very easy to pick up and go with you. Bring it to the couch, bring it to the kitchen, dare I say, bring it to the toilet with you. And this lightweight form factor means that it's super thin, super light, very easy to pick up and use, which is what you want in a nice tablet. What this really excels at is exactly what it says it is, right? It is an iPad mini. It's a smaller version of the iPad. And that means that you can hold it a lot easier. So in recent years, as iPads have gotten bigger, I actually found myself reverting to the landscape orientation because I found it a lot easier to hold those bigger iPads in that orientation, use all the split screen features and stuff like that. And even though you can use all the split screen features on this iPad mini, because it's a smaller display, I find myself not necessarily wanting to put it into split screen mode. I like having the full app take up the whole display here. And because of that, I've been using this a lot in portrait mode again lately. And it does excel in that area. So I love browsing websites with this form factor. It's great to read through entire articles on this thing. If you like to read books, if you use the Kindle app or the Apple Books app and you read on your tablet, like this form factor, this one-handed use form factor with the mini, it is a fantastic e-reading experience. All the gestures are super easy to get to as well because of the smaller display. And it even kind of changes the way you use your iPad in other areas. So if I'm typing out notes or messages, or even just entering the URL to a website, it's very easy just to hold this in the portrait mode. Your thumbs can reach every area of the keyboard to type with. And even in landscape mode, my thumbs can reach the entirety of the bottom display. So you really don't have to, on my 12.9-inch iPad Pro, if I was using the software keyboard in landscape mode, I would have to plop that thing down in my lap, start typing away. And that's kind of like a disconnected experience where all of a sudden you are casually browsing on the couch or something like that. And if you're laying down, it's kind of hard to type. So you have to get up, put the iPad down, start typing. With this, it's no problem. You could be lounging down, laying back, type away. It's a great experience. It really is a lounge iPad. And it's very easy to relax with this thing. It's not like a giant 1.6-pound tablet, right? Like, this is super lightweight, super easy to handle. Another area where I like this a lot too, and I think it has advantages over the bigger iPad, and this might actually be surprising to you, is gaming. So if you play a lot of games on your iPad, especially on the bigger iPads, right? The controls can actually be kind of awkward to get to. I know the display is big and nice and beautiful to look at as you're playing a game, but some of the controls, because of the spacing of it, they're a little bit harder to access. And with the iPad mini, again, because your thumbs can basically reach any portion of the screen with ease, there's no fatigue there. And this device is basically just a smaller version of the iPad Air. And that even comes down to iPad OS. So this is full iPad OS. This isn't like a special mini version of iPad OS. Like anything you can do on the iPad Air or even the 12.9-inch iPad Pro, you can basically do on this small iPad mini. So you can do split screen multitasking. You can have like 3 separate windows up and a picture-in-picture video. And you can do all that stuff. It even has a USB-C port, so if you want to do faster data transfers, you can do that. I'm sure you could hook this iPad mini up to a USB external monitor too, even though I haven't tested that. You could technically, if you wanted to, connect a mouse and keyboard to this and get all the full mouse and trackpad support on iPad OS. So in form factor and everything, this is basically just a smaller version of the iPad Air. But in a way that kind of has some negatives to it too, because, and I think this actually applies to all iPads out right now with the newest version of iPad OS 15, and that is that Apple has some like strange margins going on, and they're really apparent on the smaller display of the iPad mini, because you would expect that, especially on a smaller tablet, Apple would want to use all the display space available to them, and especially in landscape mode, when you look at the iPad mini and you kind of look on these margins on the side, there is just a lot of unused space here. And I would hope that maybe in a future update, Apple is going to listen to this feedback and kind of expand this. Like, we're already seeing like smaller icons because of the smaller tablet size here, and it just doesn't look like a home screen that was made with the iPad mini in mind. It kind of just feels like an afterthought. And I would hope from a company like Apple, this would be more of a tailored experience. But there are some things I don't like about this form factor, and that kind of has to do with some of the changes that Apple has made to the placement of things like the volume button. So they actually had to fit the full-sized Apple Pencil on here, which is almost the full size of the iPad mini, and that means that they had to remove the volume buttons from the side over here and place them on the top. Now, when using it in portrait mode, which again, I've been using the iPad mini a lot that way, it's very awkward to kind of reach up here and press the volume buttons. In landscape mode, it's a little bit easier to do that, but my muscle memory of remembering the volume buttons from being on the side from the iPads and also my iPhone, my brain always messes up and just doesn't know where to go for the volume buttons. I'm hoping maybe that will change over time. That also means that taking a screenshot's kind of a little bit awkward too, which I do a lot. So now you kind of have to do like this little claw maneuver on the side over here. So that is an awkward experience as well, where you have to touch the power button and the volume button at the same time. Speaking of the power button, it is a Touch ID power button, so no Face ID on this iPad mini. Again, this is a smaller version of the iPad Air, but the Touch ID sensor is super fast to unlock. Like, as soon as you actually press the power button, I always find that the iPad is unlocked, and then if you actually rest your finger on it, it will just bypass the lock screen and open up too. So that's a nice user experience. I honestly prefer Face ID though, not for unlocking the iPad and getting into it. I think Touch ID is fine for that. It's when I'm using the iPad and I get to like password autofill in Safari on an iPad Pro with Face ID, it would scan my face, unlock it, and I'd be right into entering my password. With this, it's an extra step, and I gotta remember, who's not paying the light bills around here? As I was saying, it's an extra step, so you have to remember to press the Touch ID button. So, it's fine, but for me, it's a little bit annoying. The display quality is okay. It's good. It's like that standard iPad display, LCD. I've gotten really used to the mini LED display on the 12.9-inch iPad Pro, though. I really like that display, and when I came back to this standard LCD display, which the iPad Air, the 11-inch iPad Pro uses, and this iPad mini uses, when I was looking at like black levels and stuff like that, I just felt like it looked a little bit washed out. But colors and stuff like this look good. It's a color accurate display as well. If you're doing any sort of photo editing, or if you like to draw or stuff like that, I guess you can have accurate colors, not necessarily have to worry about that stuff. And the speakers on this are pretty good too. So they're a big improvement from the old iPad mini for sure, because that only had bottom firing speakers. But they're definitely worse than the iPad Pro, but they're good enough, right? You kind of get like a stereo landscape orientation of the speakers here. And I didn't have any problem watching like YouTube videos or listening to music in the time I've been using the iPad mini. So remember when I said the iPad mini was weird? Let's kind of talk about that now. So this iPad mini has features that the more expensive $600 iPad Air doesn't have. One of those features would be the front-facing camera, which has center stage. The iPad Air doesn't have it. This iPad mini has it. It can kind of like pan and track you as you're doing FaceTime or other video calls. It's a cool feature. I liked it on my iPad Pro. I like it on the iPad mini. So I'm happy to see that it's here. The stranger thing about this iPad mini is that it is more powerful than the iPad Air. It comes with an A15 chip. The iPad Air comes with an A14 chip. Yes, the A15 chip is a little bit downclocked compared to the recent iPhone 13s, and it does come with 4 gigabytes of RAM, but if you're looking at like Geekbench scores and stuff like that, this iPad mini, more powerful for the first time ever than the regular iPad. Every time that Apple has introduced the iPad mini, it has never been more powerful than the regular iPad Air. Now, it's not as powerful as the iPad Pros, but if you're comparing this against the Air, this has more power and it's smaller. So it is strange in that way. And like I said before, there is no technical limitations with this device because it has iPad OS. Like, if you want to draw on this iPad, if you want to do video editing on this iPad, if you want to do split screen multitasking on this iPad, it is not limited. There is no software limitations on this device. But we have to acknowledge something else about this iPad, and that is that there is no smart connector on the back. Apple didn't make a keyboard for this. There's no Magic Keyboard like the iPad Air has. There's no, keyboard with trackpad support. Maybe a third party will. They probably will. A third party probably will make a keyboard case for this. But Apple does not offer a first-party experience keyboard for it, and there's no physical smart connector to attach a keyboard to it. So if someone does make a keyboard, it's gonna have to be a Bluetooth keyboard. And this is why the iPad mini is a little bit strange, because this is a purely, or at least Apple is intending this to be, a pure tablet experience. And what I found is that while using this mini in the short time that I've been using it, is that the reason why I am starting to pick up this mini a lot, well, it is new, I should say that, but I found that this is a super easy iPad to pick up and take to the couch, take to the kitchen, all that stuff, and use because it's not attached to a keyboard case. I'm not expecting to use it as a device where I'm trying to replace my laptop with it. Like if I had to go do something that I needed a laptop to, I picked up my MacBook. Or if I needed to, go video edit it, I would go do it on my iMac. With this, I did not feel the pressure to try and do any of that stuff with it. This user experience is kind of the iPad user experience in the purest form factor. Because every other iPad that Apple sells, even down to the cheap $329 iPad, is in a way trying to replace your laptop. Apple is selling these keyboard accessories that attach to all of these iPads, and Apple has been pitching these iPads as laptop replacements, especially in things like the classroom. You're not worrying about that with the Mini fulfilling that role. You're not trying to make this iPad your next laptop or your next video editing machine. You're using the iPad in its purest form since Steve Jobs introduced us to the seamless tablet experience 11 years ago. The Mini is always ready to be picked up and brought to the couch, to the kitchen, and yes, to the toilet. Ironically enough, Steve Jobs never wanted to develop or make a smaller version of the iPad. He was against that idea. And now it's actually the one that's truest to his original vision. It's not a phone. It's not a laptop. It's a device that sits comfortably in the middle of those two devices, and it offers a better experience at certain things than a phone or a laptop, and it excels in those casual use case scenarios. So, in a lot of ways, the iPad mini isn't weird. It's actually the last iPad. The one truest to the original iPad vision.